Welcome back to The Big Picture. Right now, we are joined by David Ector along with State Representative Latyna Humphrey, and we are talking about a job fair going on at the Columbus Metropolitan Libraries. And this is all about getting folks that have, whether they be prior felony convictions or misdemeanor convictions, how to get them linked up with resources to find gainful employment. David, talk to me a little about how important it is that these job fairs exist and to get folks who may have these barriers to employment these resources.
Well, the reality is, I do have the lived experience. And from a statistical standpoint, I see people coming out of prison. The literacy rate is 70%. People coming out of prison can't read or write. So, when you look at the component, you say to yourself, what can we do to curb this recidivism rate? And employment has been the key. I look at the barriers. A lot of people come out, they don't have access. And what I do is I fill that void. I give them the access that's needed. I put the employment in their faces, the felon-friendly employment, and the wraparound services because, I look at things and people are doing 25, 30 years in prison. They come out, they don't even know how to use a cell phone or a camera phone. So, a lot of times they don't have the social skills. And I say to myself, we give them mock interviews, make them comfortable, put them in real interviews afterwards to get them, to the reality of what it really feels like to be in that type of environment. And it's been working, After the mock interviews, they do real interviews, they get hired, and they're happy, because that's the only thing that can actually curb the recidivism.
Do you mind sharing more about your story and when you were incarcerated, when you got out, and what, assimilating back into normality was like?
Well, I did a 10-to-life sentence in the feds. And, when I went in there, I realized that the resources aren't there. The education isn't there. They took that out of the prisons. So a lot of times, when you come out, I'm surrounded by people that look just like me, that have the same background as me. So, when I come out of prison, what is my result? Only thing I'm thinking about is going back to the same thing that put me in prison. And along with 80% of the individuals, because we haven't really learned anything. So what I do is, nobody really gave me the opportunity as a child to, and said, hey, Kroger's is hiring, paying $12 an hour. Nobody ever gave that to me. So what I try to do is give these young men and women something that nobody ever gave to me and give them that opportunity. And it's working,
And, we have seen a shift in recent years where more employers are willing to maybe drop some of the stigma around folks who have spent time in the criminal justice system. And Representative Humphrey, this has been kind of a focus of some legislation that you've had. How did you two get connected, and what has been some of the work that, has recently moved through the State House with you?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. Honestly, I think David will have to answer that question. I feel like somehow he found me on Instagram or something. I really do not know, but I guess the work that I've done has been able to kind of speak volumes for itself. I tell people, I think since COVID is when we started seeing a shift in employers really thinking about not only their businesses, but how do we make sure that we actively and accurately run these businesses, and we have to make sure we're hiring people. And I think that has forced them to take, COVID has forced them to take a second look at making sure that they give folks second chances. And so I've been really successful in the State House as it related to reentry. So the first bill was the certificate qualification of housing. It's the first bill in Ohio's history to allow for folks who have been justice involved to find a pathway towards housing. Now, it's not a handout of housing, but it allows for not an employer, but a landlord to look past a person's record and say, listen, I can rent to you because you proved through DRC, you proved through our governor, et cetera, that you have been rehabilitated. And so I'm super proud of that work. Most recently, I guess it was on the 24th, the governor signed another piece of my legislation into law. It is House Bill 268. It revises the CQE, which we based the CQH off of. But the CQE is another pathway towards employment for employers. Essentially what it does is it gives those who have been justice involved the opportunity to go before the courts, prove that they've been rehabilitated, then take that certificate to an employer and say, listen, you're going to pull up my record, you're going to see X, Y, and Z. But again, according to DRC, according to the state, and et cetera, you can give me a job, and then they also get a tax credit for it. So that's been in place since 2012. Where I come in for the CQE that the governor just signed into law was that revision to say you don't have to wait until you have completed community control, which we know can last anywhere between 2 to 5 years. You can wait a year after you come home from incarceration and then apply. So you don't have to go that long waiting period to, try to get employment. You can get it basically almost as soon as you come home from incarceration.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, how important is that the first couple hours, the first day, the first year after coming out of being incarcerated and trying to figure out how to get your bearings again? Is that when you guys try to move in, like the first week or so?
So for me, I have indirect lived experience. My mom is okay with me sharing this. She is a returning citizen, has been incarcerated a number of times, but what I have seen and what I know through her actual lived experience is having a job immediately is really important. And so she's been blessed because she does have education, et cetera, to find jobs, but she's always helped me to understand that folks need housing, folks need jobs, folks need resources, and when they have those resources, the less likely they are to recidivize. Now, we know drug substance use and all that, that's a sickness. We know that. And so sometimes it makes it hard for folks, but folks who are literally coming home and making that decision and are able to make that decision to be on that straight and narrow, like if they have the resources to be able to do the right thing, they will. And I think that's where we come in as state legislators to say, listen, we want safer communities. We want to help you. We want thriving communities. And when we do that, I think the better off we'll be.
And you've both mentioned it, that the problem of recidivism or returning, if there aren't those resources out there, if you don't have that opportunity to find employment, then it's difficult to find a way to make that change. This job fair right now, it limits that experience to about 150 attendees. This is your, second year of doing this. Looking at the folks that you've been able to get connected, what have been some of the responses to this? Any opportunities to, one, expand the size of this, and how many folks have you been able to help?
The reality is I limit it to 150 people, but sometimes it's 500 to 1,500 people that show up, which shows the need. When I look at things, I just say that it's a little different than the normal job fair because we try to show people how their lived experiences, their time in prison, some of the things that they went to is transferable. So what we do on their resume is make sure that it is put into their resume. Like if you was in prison and you worked in the kitchen for 11 years of your time, what we try to do on their resume is make sure that they understand you served 500 people in an hour. You a chef, or you worked as a janitor in prison. That's transferable into the workforce. I mean, some of the biggest drug dealers in the world are some of the best car salesmen. Only thing you're doing is changing the product and changing the demographic. But, you encourage them, listen, you're in sales. That's one of the hardest things to do, is sell drugs. You're dealing with logistics, import, export. So I just try to let them understand, listen, if you can do that, it's no job in this world that you cannot do. And, and then from my personal experiences, I just try to let them know, listen, I made mistakes. I don't want you to be like me. And that's why I do this particular event and give wraparound services to individuals because, it curbs the recidivism rate. We see that it's working. The data shows it. And we want to continue to do it.
And, you mentioned that kind of right there of we want, and it's also a key part of the state's prison system is that rehabilitation factor of it, is that we don't, once folks get out of the system, we don't want them to fall back into that same pattern. And it's so important that you don't have that opportunity to fall back into whatever it was that put you into that system, and kind of in your own experience, what kept you from making that mistake? How did what you received in the system, and then once you got out into what the work you are doing right now, has kind of made you make this turn?
Well, the reality is when I got out, I still made the same mistakes. You know, you get out of prison, that's not what changes you. What changes you, you get out here and back into the environment, and you do real work. You get involved in things that are different. You don't change. What I want to say to you is this. Change involves when you go through difficulty. You know, you go through adversity. You know, sometimes some of the hardest things in life are some of the best things. You know, right now I'm working with a behavioral health facility. I'm using my own struggles, peer support, CDCAs. I'm like a certified peer, chemical dependency counselor. So what I do is I use my personal lived experience, and I take advantage of that, and I apply what I've learned in the streets to try to help people get recovery, get real help. So, you know, you can use some of your trials and make the best of it, and that's what I've been doing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
And I know you said like people that used to sell drugs, they could make great car salesmen.
Absolutely.
A lot of the people that you are dealing with and working with, what have they been convicted for? And how do you kind of go through that process of working with them, kind of being like, you know, you have other gifts and you can turn them into profit?
Well, what I try to do with the job fairs, I try not to really pry, but, you know, when I see people that come in, they've been convicted of murder, you know, drug dealing, rape, a little bit of everything from F1s on the federal side to literally conspiracy to everything you can think about. And, you know, when you have that impact in the streets and you see people come up to you, hugging you and just saying, Dave, man, I love you, I appreciate you, you know, that's the real reward, because I don't get any monetary means for anything I do it. I don't have a 501(c)(3), I don't have a nonprofit. I do it because it's a need that's needed in every hood. It's not about whether you're a Democrat or Republican. It's more about, you know, some of the barriers that you go through that you see out here in society and what's needed for the people. And that's why I do it. I just do it for the people, you know?
And Representative Humphrey, for maybe even some of your colleagues in the State House or some folks who maybe be your constituents that say, we shouldn't be giving people a second chance, what do you say to them?
Well, so this is a convoluted question, and thank you for it, Colin. I'll tell you that, and I just like to be transparent. In the State House, I'm not necessarily hearing that. I'll tell you, you know, there's a lot more work that we could do to better the reentry space, but I think in order to get all the things that I've been able to get done and others have been able to get done as it relates to reentry, we've got to do it collectively. And so I think, like I said, my colleagues are realizing that. And I think they're realizing it, especially my colleagues on the other side are realizing it because in part of COVID, business owners coming to talk to them to say, listen, I need to hire somebody. And these people are willing to work, so I need you to be able to give me the leverage to do that. And so I think that helps some of those conversations. Now, to my constituents, and I have not really ever been faced with this question, but I'll say about 25% of my constituency, from what I've seen from statistics, is in some way justice involved. And so because of that, I try to provide opportunities for my constituency, because I understand that when we provide opportunities, literally we create safer communities. And so, what I would say to them is the facts. 25% of folks have some type of involvement, even if it was 25 years ago. The reality is it happened. And if we don't provide these opportunities, it makes it hard for families to live a thriving and sustainable life. You would go from maybe minimum wage jobs by providing the opportunities that we have through the State House, then you can thrive to maybe a $20 plus job to be able to further take care of your families. And so I think the conversation that I would have with my constituents that come to me with that question, if it ever was to happen, was to throw the facts in their face. 25% of you all have some type of involvement. So that's why I focus on it.
Yeah,
Sounds like a lot of progress has been made, and obviously there's more to be made.
Yes.
So what other reentry initiatives are you working on next?
Wow. And because I'm always like super focused on, what I have right now. And I'll tell you, there have been lots of strides. And I think we kind of joked about earlier, I didn't even realize the bill was signed into law. So it's just like really until the hour that it happened, someone reached out to me and let me know. So I say all that to say, I wouldn't be able to tell you right now because I'm so focused on what's in front of me, making sure the CQH that I talked about earlier is being applied appropriately so that folks can get housing, making sure that the CQE is going to run smoothly so that more folks can apply, because we know that year waiting period, or those periods that folks had to wait, it really deterred people from even applying for the CQE. So now I hope more people apply because they don't have to wait as long. So my focus is, okay, let's make sure that these things are being applied appropriately, and then we'll figure out what else is next. But I'll figure out something.
Yeah, Representative Humphrey, David, thanks so much for joining us here on The Big Picture.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.